American Maritime Voices was created to help you speak up, show your pride, and when needed, push back. The future of maritime is in your hands, and its story needs to be told. Will you help tell it?
Welcome back to the American Maritime Podcast, powered by Big Whig Podcasts. We're glad to have you aboard. I'm your host, Sara Fuentes, and today we are excited to have Julio Rivera, a sharp political commentator and founder of cybersecurity and national security news website, itfunk.org. Julio, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk about some really serious issues.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Let's start off by getting to know you a little bit. Tell us how you got into journalism and political commentary. We were talking before we started. You said you were in the Navy, and now you're a writer and thinker. How does
Yeah, it's crazy. I was in the United States Navy straight out of high school, and then I went into the private sector, and I was actually working in the debt collection industry. So my first kind of interaction with politics, where it became like something that I had to focus on because of professional issues, was when the Dodd-Frank Act actually really attacked the debt collection industry. So that was like the first time I was just like, okay, government in politics is affecting, my ability to do business. And then I started to get more deeply into politics. I was always kind of a conservative and a pro-American patriot type of individual. That's why I went into the service to serve, the country and whatnot. But then I started paying attention to a lot of things that were going on during the Obama administration, a lot of the wasteful spending, a lot of like sort of the globalism, us losing a lot of our, domestic industries to overseas entities and things of that sort. As a result of that, I started to get more politically active, and then eventually I started to get into politics locally and nationally, supporting some of the presidential campaigns.
Okay, great. And then the Jones Act specifically is a really important issue that, as you said, kind of affects American industry and making sure you have American workers coming first. So obviously, as you know, the Jones Act requires that goods being moved between two U.S. points is on a U.S. built, U.S. crewed, U.S. owned, U.S. flagged ship. So what drives you? How did that catch your interest? And what makes you such a strong advocate for the 650,000 men and women working in the American maritime industry?
Well, to tell you the truth, I mean, I've been aware of the Jones Act since I was in the Navy, obviously dealing with ships and national security and all the aspects which are, of particular importance to the United States citizens, as far as what the Jones Act provides. One of the things that really, to me, and I've noticed this, from watching, what's been going on with businesses, and my parents even actually, they were in the manufacturing industry. There are people that came from Puerto Rico. They didn't have a large amount of education, so they were basically blue-collar, hard-working people. And I saw how industries have been outsourced.
Right.
Whether it's manufacturing or anything else. We're basically giving away the store. In a lot of ways, globalism and the way that American politicians are influenced by foreign entities, it kind of opens up the market to where we're giving away a lot of jobs to other countries. And I think the Jones Act, it's not just only about jobs, it's about national security. So I think that's something that's lost on, I think, a lot of individuals, and I consider myself, listen, I'm as a libertarian as it comes when it comes to, economic things, or things related to business or, being an entrepreneur and whatnot. But the Jones Act to me is a very common sense sort of piece of legislation. If you want to keep, especially if you want to keep the country safe, especially in the times that we're in now, where there's a lot of instability globally.
Right.
You got people moving around the world. You got terrorists moving around, from country to country. We obviously know what's going on in the southern border. There have been a lot of people that we know are affiliated with, predominantly Muslim Middle Eastern countries where there is a lot of terrorism being born out of, and a lot of these people are sneaking into the United States through the southern border. Could you imagine if we didn't have the Jones Act and we had like these foreign ships coming in? There could be, a terrorist attack against, a domestic port very easily. under those circumstances. So it's a very important thing for national security.
I agree completely. Maritime border security is a huge aspect that doesn't get as much attention as other border security does. And so what would you say to opponents of the Jones Act? Like you said, a lot of them are libertarian like you are. What would you say to them about this kind of national security need that goes beyond something's cheap now?
Yeah, it's not all about saving a penny. I mean, that's unfortunately kind of the dark side of capitalism. As much of a capitalist as I am, and as much as I am, like I told you, very libertarian minded economically. I mean, it's not always about making every last penny. You have to make sure that things are done the right way. Otherwise, you won't have a country. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if you're giving away everything, right now. Up until, Donald Trump came back into office, it's like we don't even have a border. You don't have a border, you don't have a country. And if you're giving away all your industries, you're not going to have those good, high-paying jobs, and you're not going to have the security that, having the Jones Act affords you.
Right, or even having that skill set, right?
That skill set, yeah, we lose those things generationally. I mean, that's why a lot of countries, unfortunately, are beating us at a lot of industries. Like we're not where we should be with, chip making and a lot of other industries that we're giving away to China.
Yeah, something, you wrote an article in December about protecting America's homeland security through our maritime borders. And you said something in there that I really liked about, short-term savings versus what you lose in the long term. And it seems that's really like what you're getting at, right? Is that?
Exactly, yeah. And not only that, like our development for new industries, like we're talking now about offshore wind projects. We can't lead from behind.
Right.
And these are the industries of the future. Instead of us, let's say, getting into, let's say, something like the Paris Climate Accords in order to try to show that we're, on the cutting edge of, keeping the world green or whatnot. That was bad policy because, China's not complying with any of that stuff. But if we want to really set the tone globally for green energy, we have to really dive into things like these offshore wind projects. Right. And the Jones Act is very important to these offshore wind projects because of these specialized vessels that we need to get these turbines built. I think that's really like the energy of the future. I think, or at least a big part of it. And the Jones Act, I think, is going to be key to America leading and not falling behind, or because of short-sighted, trying to make, an extra penny today, giving that industry away to the rest of the world. America really, really needs to lead again.
Right, absolutely. I couldn't have put that better myself. Yeah. And so tell us a little bit more about, you touched on briefly, homeland security, national security. How is the Jones Act important for that national security?
Well, I mean, ultimately, that way we know who's coming in from port to port. It's one thing, we could check somebody in when they're coming from, a foreign country, but that's it. That's their only stop. We can take a look, right. We can inspect their ship. It's harder for anybody to come in and import, either import terrorists or come in with a ship that's loaded with, God forbid, a bomb or anything like that. If they're moving from port to port, it would be a lot easier for them. Not only that, but from a logistical standpoint, they get to learn our waterways. They get to learn our ways, our customs, and it's easier to blend in once you know what the layout is.
Right.
It's really a security issue. I think at the most, like. Don't get me wrong, from the 650,000 people that are employed, we obviously know, I know as somebody of Puerto Rican descent how important it is to the island. It does generate a lot of revenue, but it's not only that. It really is ultimately, especially right now with all the instability that we've, the world kind of spiraled out of control. We went from like the Abraham Accords and all these wonderful things to, strife in the Middle East and obviously the border issues, America's out of control. Obviously, you could even say that the Ukrainian war is related to energy in a sense because, when Joe Biden went into office, he made a pact to say that, okay, we're gonna stop giving drilling licenses domestically. And he signed all those green executive orders. He stopped Keystone, obviously, and all those things. And he said, we're going to buy more fossil fuel from Russia. So we put ourselves kind of in Russia, the palm of Russia's hand from a fossil fuel perspective. And we saw, obviously, what happened to prices after, the war started and when we obviously issued sanctions against them not to buy it. So it's like, there's a lot of aspects where, national security, I think, is underrated. I think everybody thinks that the world is as civilized and other countries are as
Everyone's gonna play
peaceful
by the
and
same
nice.
rules.
And nobody's,
Right.
yeah, we're not all playing by the same rules. And if we didn't learn that during the Biden administration, we never will. People need to learn how to vote with common sense.
And so, speaking of that, what do you think President Trump's reelection means for maritime policy and for American domestic maritime?
Well, this is actually kind of a complicated answer. First off, I think that Donald Trump understands the importance of the Jones Act, and I think he's going to fight, to keep it in place because he understands what it means for national security, for American jobs, for new emerging American industries, which require Jones Act compliant vessels and all that stuff. The one thing where I will say that I do have a little bit of concern is with some of the steel and the aluminum tariffs. I understand the importance of stimulating those industries in the United States. He did a great job in his first term of doing that before a lot of those tariffs were played with by subsequent administration. But the fact of the matter is, it's probably going to take a little while to get those costs driven down. And I think for shipbuilders, those raw materials may temporarily be a little bit more expensive. So that's a little bit of an issue of concern, but I think that we're working through that. I think under the Trump administration.
Yeah, and I think it's all kind of like you said of a piece, right? We're bringing these industries and these resources back home.
Exactly, it's important. I think the temporary, let's say if we go through a period where things temporarily may go up, it's important. It's like a Band-Aid that you have to rip off. You have to kind of deal with a little bit of difficulty in order for the greater good over time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to touch on another topic. You mentioned being from Puerto Rico. Your family's from Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Obviously, maritime is an island, and so maritime is critically important to Puerto Rico. We talk a lot about the importance of that dedicated regular service from those Jones Act carriers. Can you tell us a little bit about what you hear from friends and family on the island about the American maritime industry in Puerto Rico?
I think unfortunately the media in Puerto Rico is like all the bad elements of what we have in America in terms of the liberal media on steroids. There's just so much media. There's so many little satellite networks. There's 22 newscasts, and they're all very... I think they're more liberal, and I think they do the bidding of the Democrats, in my opinion. I mean, that's just from me watching it there. So I think a lot of the, your garden variety, your typical Puerto Rican just doesn't really completely understand the importance of the Jones Act and what the issue is. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, have bought into the whole thing where, we've got to waive that because it's making shipping more expensive and it's doing this, doing that. But I mean, obviously, there was a really important study, which I'm sure that you're aware of, the Ernst & Young one, where I mean, when you talk about it's 2,000 jobs on the island. It's $100 million in actual wages to Puerto Rican work. And in Puerto Rico, man, we know what the unemployment numbers are there.
Right.
We know the sheer number of people who are on entitlements there. It's become, the Jones Act and those jobs are a real pillar in terms of maintaining any sort of, economic strength in there. Because it's $200 million in revenue that it creates. It's, the Jones Act is very critically important to Puerto Rico. And I think, unfortunately, because of, media and the influence of media, that actually speaks to the piece that I most recently wrote in terms of what they're trying to do an all-out attack on the Jones Act, trying to say that it's an outdated piece of legislation or somehow it makes shipping more expensive. But actually, the Jones Act in that Ernst & Young study, it actually showed that shipping costs in Puerto Rico were actually 27 times cheaper as a result of the Jones Act, and the delays. There were 8 times. You had 8 times less in terms of shipping delays within the supply chain, because we all know that during COVID, I mean, the supply chain was a nightmare. So this actually plays in with Trump too. I mean, if you talk about the issue with the Panama Canal and all these things, there's a great opportunity for the maritime and the shipping industry under the Trump administration to really boom, with some of the ideas that he has in terms of the Panama Canal and strengthening the Jones Act.
Yeah, and really strengthening American shipping, yes. And, that kind of regular service that goes onto the island, I'm sure really helps Puerto Rican business owners too, right? To know that they're going to get service at the same time or the same day every week. And so helps those business owners export their products, helps with that brain drain too, because if you have these jobs, you can stay on the island, go work, and come back home.
I listen to a lot of people speak, and I just feel like, unfortunately, a lot of people like the importance of issues like this and like America First policies and things that benefit us first, they don't seem to. There seems to be a disconnect in terms of understanding the importance of that.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
think
sad.
a lot more education has to happen. And so, talking about the kind of recovery efforts and the hurricane, that was really a turning point for Puerto Rico and their feelings on the maritime industry. Could you talk a little bit more about how those Jones Act carriers actually aided in the recovery?
Oh yeah, they were able to get in there. They were able to do what they needed to do, bring things in and out more efficiently. I think that there was no issues with supply chain even post the hurricane. That was something actually that the Trump administration I think did a great job with, even bringing in hospital ships right beyond the eye of the storm. I mean, as soon as the storm passed, there were hospital ships there and stuff. But I think one of the things that people don't understand enough is that, like they made a big deal attacking the Jones Act, saying we're going to temporarily waive the Jones Act so people could come in. So it's like why sit here and attack something that's so critically important to our national security if it really has no functional need to actually remove it? I mean, everything moved exactly the way that it needed to move with the Jones Act in place. So there's really no point to attacking it, honestly. I think, listen, Puerto Rico has the opportunity to do great things because of actually, something, I'm going to give credit to Barack Obama for this. Act 20 and Act 22 of 2012, there's incredible opportunities on the island to make money because of those tax benefits, because of those acts. Like you could literally effectively have a 4% tax on a business. If you go there and you set up a business, and there's very minimal sort of requirements in order to qualify for these tax breaks, but people don't want to go and set up business there. They don't want to go and set up business there because there's a lot of things. The island is horrifically mismanaged. We were talking before about PREPA, the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority raising billions of dollars in public bond sales and taking out loans and all sorts of things, and then they never fixed the power grid. And this directly affected my family. My father, who's an older gentleman, had some health problems, was on dialysis. In 2017, when the storm hit, they went through a period where he couldn't get his dialysis for about a week, and then he got a blood infection. He was dead within 6 weeks of the storm hitting, and I think that was directly, like I would, if I had to give the blame to anyone, I would say that was because of PREPA. Yeah, PREPA.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the PREPA.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah.
The energy grid is really horrific, and that's, I think, a source of a lot of problems. And then the Jones Act becomes an easy scapegoat.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like blame it on the Jones Act. But the truth of the matter is, if Puerto Rico had, their stuff together, they would be, like I said, a wonderful opportunity for people to go there and do all types of wonderful things in business, and especially obviously with the access for the shipping and everything, because it's an island. And if they had a decent, if you could invest in a factory and know that it wasn't gonna, because let's say you do all the costs and you set up a factory. What's going to happen if you lose power for a week? Yeah. It's impossible to do business. So people don't want to make the investment there. But because of Act 20 and Act 22, I mean, there's amazing economic opportunities for the island of Puerto Rico for people coming in there to set up business, and they just won't do it.
Yeah. It sounds like what the island really needs is that kind of predictable, stable, whether it's shipping or energy, it's that stability that businesses really need to make those investments.
Yeah.
American Maritime Voices was created to help you speak up, show your pride, and when needed, push back. The future of maritime is in your hands, and its story needs to be told. Will you help tell it?
Getting back to something that you mentioned earlier, who would oppose this? What we found is it's a lot of kind of foreign think tanks or foreign writers that are usually opposing the Jones Act. And what would you say to that statement?
Yeah, that's funny. It's actually, I wrote a piece that was just recently up at American Greatness. And I think it really makes an important point, particularly to the emerging offshore wind energy industry. So we basically had this group known as IBFSA. It's a Belgium group. Was paying Story Squad Media, which is an American entity, to create these TikTok videos attacking the Jones Act. We found this out through a FARA disclosure and whatnot. But basically, it's basically like, I think, international entities trying to cut into an emerging American industry, which we're at the cutting edge of. They want to marginalize by basically saying, okay, if we get rid of the Jones Act, then we'll find a way to do this for 2% less.
Right.
And then, the greedy, let's say, and unfortunately, that's the thing, the people are greedy, whether they're American businesses or businesses internationally, to go ahead and, kind of take command of that emerging industry.
Yeah.
But that's something that we lose the power of. Like, I think we should, anything that we're innovating, we should be able to keep. We made mass production of vehicles. We created the best ships. Like, that's the one thing too, because people talk about China and tonnage. Does China produce more ships than the United States now? Yeah, technically they do, but they're garbage.
Right.
They can't deal with our Navy. They can't compete with us. Listen, man, I'm very proud to have been part of the most powerful military force in the history of the world, the United States Navy. There is no Navy that can compete with us, no matter cost or whatever. And, obviously the Jones Act does a lot to protect that. Listen, the biggest investment I'm ever going to make, you're ever going to make, or any American that works is a part of that, whatever, 53% of people who actually pay taxes. The biggest investment we ever make is into the country.
Right.
So why wouldn't you want your country to be exceptional? You know what I mean? It's like, I didn't elect Donald Trump to be, or vote for Donald Trump to be president of the world, or be caretaker of the world, or to make all, do all this U.S. aid, giving away all of our tax money. I want him to make the strongest possible America. And, that's honestly, and then, the Jones Act is a big part of that, to a critical sector, our shipping, supply chain, security. It applies to so many things.
Right. It's totally critical. I want to foot stomp what you said. So a foreign company was paying an advertiser to do anti-Jones Act ads on social media to try and get a cut of our market and take jobs away from Americans?
Yeah. So they're basically saying, like, listen, we can make a little bit of money, but America will basically be unguarded. It's waterways. Like, we're gonna make your waterways susceptible to all types of potential terrorism and attacks and all this kind of stuff, so we can make a couple of bucks. Like, no, it's not fair. It's not fair.
Unacceptable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Well, thank you very much for that. And so jumping back to the current administration, I feel like we've touched on a number of areas where there's some room for growth, or where we see the administration really putting Americans and American jobs first. Are there any other industries where you see this potential for growth if we make the right investments in maritime? You mentioned offshore wind, our Navy and shipbuilding. What else would you like to see from this administration?
You know what? I really want to see the administration really up the ante in terms of, really building a lot of domestic ships here and not giving that, obviously with the Jones Act, we don't want to, we can't do it any other way and stuff. But I mean, we really want to bring the cost of products down at the retail level. If you create a good economic environment through things like, energy policy, deregulation, keeping the Jones Act strong, making domestic shipping a lot stronger, you will see the prices come down everywhere.
Yeah. I hope so. I look forward to that.
I know so.
Good. Great. I look forward to
You
that.
can bring me on in 4 years and we can take a look and see if I was right or wrong.
I look forward to it. I'm sure you will be. All right. So before we close out this episode of America's Maritime Podcast, are there any other final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
I'd really like to see kind of a rejuvenation of American pride, and I think the Jones Act lies right in the middle of that.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Julio, for your time today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was a pleasure.
Appreciate having you on. That's all for this episode of the American Maritime Podcast. And we hope that our audience will share this show and also visit AmericanMaritimeVoices.org and sign up to be a voice on maritime issues. Again, that's AmericanMaritimeVoices.org. Check it out. Julio, thank you so much for being with us today and for championing the hardworking men and women of American Maritime. I'm Sada Fuentes, signing off.